Thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth. Good evening. I'm Erin Ryan, CEO of NAMI Westside Los Angeles. And welcome back to our Janis Black Warner Speaker Series for the month of June, Pride Month. I would also like to thank our advisory council member, Janice Black Warner, for making this event possible. Janice, thank you. You continually drive us to increase our impact, and just thank you so much. I know you are a fierce advocate. We were just talking about earlier about how many fierce advocates we have here with NAMI, and you are a trailblazer among them. So thank you so much for the speaker series and all that you do for our organization and making events like this possible. So we're very grateful. And also a shout out to Cynthia Sirota, who I think maybe cornered Elan, our speaker, at our gala and said, we need to have you. You need to come. You need to come speak for us. So very grateful to you, Cynthia, for this wonderful recommendation. And Elan, thank you for being here. And I want to give a proper introduction because he is so deserving. So Elan Javanfard, LMFT, is a licensed psychotherapist, professor, author, and thought leader in the fields of mental health, mindfulness, and crisis care. He currently serves as Senior Director at Didi Hirsch Mental Health Services. Just shout out to Didi Hirsch, great community partner. We're so lucky to work with them and have them in our service area and all the work that they do across the country. So thank you, Didi Hirsch. And thank you, Elan, for being their Senior Director there. And Elan focuses on behavioral health redesign and systems level transformation to improve care for individuals experiencing mental illness, suicidal ideation, and emotional distress. Elan is a member of the board of directors of the Crisis Residential Association, helping shape policy and innovation and alternatives to hospitalization. Such important work. He lives in the Pico Robertson community of LA with his wife and his three children, one of which was very excited to receive some Maybelline makeup after our gala. So anyway, I will now hand over the microphone to Elan. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your expertise with us here tonight, Elan.
Thank you. And thank you very much for having me. And thank you again to all of the NAMI, NAMI warriors and fierce advocates who are standing up for mental health and for all the work that you guys do. Some of the faces that are here I've known for a while, gotten to know through the work at Didi Hirsch and also through the recent gala. So I'm really grateful to have this opportunity to share and speak a little bit. What my hope is and my intention for tonight is to kind of start to open our discussion and our thoughts related to several topics and kind of give us the opportunity and platform to be able to hopefully share a little bit more and disseminate a little bit more about these areas of focus. So I'll start to share a little bit of my slides and my screen. But the initial inception behind the discussion that we're having tonight was a community partnership talk that I did a while ago, at a resiliency roundtable, where I got the opportunity to meet with Cynthia and some other people as well, in which we discussed youth and substance use and addiction, but also just the idea overall of helping individuals who are experiencing different types of challenges become more present focused in their life and learn how to live a more present focused life. As a preface to the entirety of this discussion, I want to be mindful that addiction isn't just about substances. It's about losing control over something that you once felt like it was a choice to you. And for many youth, it doesn't feel like an addiction when they start using any substance. This conversation that we're hopefully going to have together is not going to be about pro or anti. I'm not going to take any stance like that. We're not going to go down the road of pro a substance or anti any substance. We're just going to have it through the discussion of pro health or pro children. We want to be able to preface this up front by saying that this is what we like to call in the field of mental health informed consent. If you know a little bit more about what you are interested in, what you are doing, you have a better sense of how you can make choices for yourself. As mentioned previously, I am the Senior Director of Whole Person Care at Didi Hirsch. And what that means is I have the unique opportunity to be able to oversee some of our direct leaders who engage when it comes to all aspects of care within Didi Hirsch. We have substance treatment services, we have crisis treatment services, outpatient services for youth, for children, for families, for parents, all across the gamut as well. And I've had the wonderful opportunity to be able to have my hand in a lot of those different baskets of services. And I want to speak from a little bit of that experience with us tonight. At any point in time, if you do have a question, definitely please drop it in the chat box. If you have a process comment, please process comment along with us as well. And we hope to also have a lot of time at the end for any general Q&A, or if you want to just place me on a soapbox of some of my opinions related to the field as well, we're happy to get to that when we get to the end of the time that we spend together as well. We're not here to panic or to preach or to pretend anything. We're just here to talk honestly about different substances and particularly focus a little bit more on weed or marijuana. And the reason that I want to focus more on that is because within the state of California, it is legal. And while things are legal, it does not necessarily mean that we have all of the informed consent about it. So, as parents and educators and community members, we often ask ourselves, is this something I need to really worry about? And the question I want us to think as individuals is, in short, can we afford to not worry if we don't have all of the information we need? So tonight we're not going to spend time scaring you. There's no scare tactics here. It's not scared straight. It's just data. It's just natural consequences and information that people need to know. And it will help you unpack your own decisions and choices when it comes to how you cope with challenges in life. That's the perspective we like to take. At DD Hirsch, we take a strong perspective related to what's called harm reduction in the substance continuum, which in essence means that we believe that any form of substance use is just coping. The person is engaging in a coping skill. It happens to be that the coping skill they may have chosen might be maladaptive for them. And the hope is that over time and education, they may start to get to a place where they choose alternative coping skills that may be more adaptive for themselves. So, in essence, all forms of addiction or substance use to some capacity are just coping. And the hope is we'll get people to cope a little bit differently or a little bit better over time. The summary that I like to provide related to addiction is related to anything. Any behavior that you consistently engage in that makes you feel good can alleviate your distress, alleviate your pain. And over time, the more you engage in that, the more your brain wants it. So the example I like to use for those of us who aren't familiar with this is food. There are certain foods that all of us have as comfort foods. There are certain foods that all of us have as the things that make us just feel happy. For me, anytime somebody gives me a donut, they become my new best friend. Now, that mentality, that's true, by the way. So just FYI for the next time you meet me. Krispy Kreme is my favorite also. So if you have that mentality that this is something that drives pleasure and increases pleasure in your body, then over time, if you keep consuming things that are pleasurable for you, you lose a little bit of the sensation of the pleasurability. If I had to eat a donut every single day, that might start causing me to not like it or feel distressed by it. And at the same time, with addiction, the challenge becomes the more a person engages in the behavior, the stronger their desire becomes to wanting it, the craving, the impulse. And at the same time, you need more and more of it to get you to the same place before. So one donut may not be enough. You may need two. One use of a substance may not be enough. You may need to go down the route of having more than that as well. And to kind of summarize this in a really succinct way that I have found to be useful for many people is this. People use substances for two reasons and two reasons only. You can place this into the two buckets you see here on the screen. People use a substance to feel something and to not feel something. Let's take a moment and reflect on that for a second. We use a substance to feel something and to not feel something. Those who engage in a substance use to feel something, it may start out as connection. It may start out as liquid courage. They're out with their friends. They're out at a nice gala or an event, and they choose to have a drink with an individual to celebrate with them. You know, in Jewish culture, we say l'chaim, which means to life. You drink with somebody to experience an engagement of life with them, to feel something with them. Now, what happens if that person engages in the same behavior, but they do it for a different reason? Their reason is not to feel a connection with another person, but it's to avoid a feeling. It's to avoid sadness. It's to push away stress. It's to minimize anxiety. It's in a room alone by themselves at the end of a difficult night rather than doing it socially with other people. Two different buckets. One uses a substance to feel something which gains connection, and one uses a substance to avoid something. While both of these pathways over long periods of time, prolonged substance use can lead to addiction, the pathway of to feel something is the pathway that many of us who are socially using something engage in and can live healthy, normative lives. But the moment we start engaging in any form of behavior as an avoidance mechanism, to not feel something, I'm feeling sad, so I use something. I'm feeling unhappy, so I eat a donut, for example. We're going to stay on that topic. That starts to turn into a problem and a problem behavior. So individuals who can engage in a substance use from the component of socializing to feel connected to other people, that may lead to just pro-social use. And for individuals who are doing it to avoid something or avoid a sensation, that can lead to masking the underlying problem and increase the susceptibility for some kind of addictive behavior. It's really important to understand these two things because at the same time, while one person can start out in the category of just using to feel something with other people, they may eventually find themselves migrating over to the other category and start using while they're by themselves as well. The classic example of this is going to be individuals who are in high school who may only drink or smoke socially. They go out with their friends, they're having a good time on the weekend, and they may engage in a substance. But then there may be somebody within that group who, outside of those group environments, by themselves at home, by themselves when no one's around, also uses and engages in that similar thing. That individual starts to go down the path of feeling, of doing something to not feel a behavior, and that hinders their ability to manage and cope with the mental health symptoms that they may be experiencing. We think about this for a moment for all of us. The research suggests that when an individual experiences a mental health crisis or any kind of crisis in their life, that within 4 to 6 weeks, they are going to find some form of coping to recover. Within 4 to 6 weeks after a crisis occurs, an individual will find some coping to recover. The question is, are they going to go down the path of healthy coping or unhealthy coping? And everyone does cope. Some people just cope in unhealthy ways, like using a substance, addiction, isolation, doubling down on their mental health symptoms and making them worse. And others engage in a pro-social behavior, like talking to their friends, joining a support group, going to therapy, going for a walk, engaging in healthy eating, all things that are also coping. Two individuals will experience the same experience of crisis or trauma, and one will pick a healthy coping mechanism and one will pick an unhealthy coping mechanism. But yet, within 6 weeks, they will do something. It is very rare. Again, I'll preface this because it's important. It is very rare that an individual will just stay stuck forever, but that does happen to some people. But for the most part, somebody will engage in some behavior that kind of helps them kick the can down the road a little bit over time. But I want to share with you a little bit about this cycle because I think it's important, but it's also a complex and layered cycle. What typically happens in the addiction cycle is that an individual will start to experience some kind of emotional trigger in their life. While they experience this emotional trigger, there will be some kind of craving that will set in. Again, I'm going to still use the example of unhealthy eating, like a donut. Person is going to feel emotionally triggered. They're going to experience a high level of stress at work, too many competing deadlines, too many competing things happening, stress at home with the family. So they start to experience a craving. I don't know about you, but if you ever stay up way too late at night, that's when you start to have cravings for all the weird things that you know you shouldn't be eating. It's very similar because you start to have this emotional trigger. You're tired. So you go back and you identify a ritual of something that has historically made you feel comforted. You find that ritualistic behavior that makes you feel comforted and you engage in that. Could be a substance behavior, it could be an addictive behavior, it could be a sweet tooth. And when you engage in that behavior and you do it in excess, the next thing that you feel is guilt because you feel guilty that you did that. Anyone here ever try to eat healthy for an entire week and eat one really bad meal and feel guilty after the fact? And because they felt guilty after the fact, they may have doubled down and eat a second bad meal later on. That is the pathway, that is the cycle. It's the same cycle when it comes to addiction. We engage in something we shouldn't have. We felt guilty that we did. We feel triggered by that fact. And it furthers us down that same spiral that leads us to engaging that behavior. And we get to a certain point where we find ourselves two boxes of donuts in and not realizing where it all went. That's a little bit of what the cycle looks like for many people. Now, to take this a little bit beyond just something that is in its own right, could be excessive, like sugar, let's go down the path of a little bit of the substance use, particularly related to teens, adults, and when we get to the high school ages as well. So according to most recent research that I was able to identify within the 2020 and beyond statistics, almost a third of high school students will have engaged in alcohol use once a month while they're in school. And about 50% have reported drinking at some point in time when they're in high school. When you start to look at the research related to marijuana use, you have about a third as well of high school seniors reporting that they had used marijuana in the past year. And approximately 8%, even though it says 6.4 here, it's closer to 8% now, who are engaging it on a daily basis. So we're not talking about on the weekends with their friends, we're talking about on a daily basis. Nicotine is similar as well. It's about 25%, but the vast majority of that nicotine is actually engaged in e-cigarettes or vaping. Prescription drug use is not as high in high school students and in youth, but it is something to be monitoring and be mindful of as well. If you take the research a little bit further, what you find is that within the last month, approximately 17% of all high school students used marijuana within the last month. 25% of 12th graders and 11% of 12th graders have used some kind of high level form of THC, which we'll talk about in a second what that is. 18% of that group also engages in THC within a vape, which in its own right can be challenging too. Now, what I want to distinguish, if you leave this webinar with just one piece of information, I may say that more than once, but let's start with the first one. If you leave this webinar with one piece of information, I want to help us distinguish and differentiate between what THC is and what CBD is. Because there are two distinct chemicals and there are two distinct things that can cause different sensations. So THC and CBD, I'm not going to go into the specifics, even though if you want to, it's on the screen of the chemical composition and compounds of them. But THC and CBD are two of the main active components found in marijuana or in cannabis. Both of them have active potentialities to them. They both have different effects on the individual, and they both can have their own benefits and setbacks as well. And there are numerous forms or methods in which individuals can engage in the use of marijuana. The most common ones are the ones that you see on the screen, which are going to be vaporizing it, smoking it, topical form, edible form, capsule form, and then the last one is going to be injectables, which is not as common, but it's important to be aware of these as well. And to know that there are two chemical compounds that play a large factor in this particular substance. What I want to do for the purposes of this group that we have here on the screen and hopefully get you to crowdsource some of the responses in the chat box. What I want to ask you guys is, in the 70s, the average potency of marijuana was only 1% THC. Does anyone want to throw into the chat box any guesses as to what the potency these days could be as of the most recent research in 2023? What the average potency of THC in marijuana could be these days? Feel free to drop into the chat box your responses, see what your guesses may be for this, and we'll take a moment, which gives me an opportunity to drink something as well. So we're seeing some answers coming in. 25%, 67% plus, 55, 80, 60. The good thing is none of you said a lower number so far. So we all know that the number is higher. What we have found in the research is that today the average potency is going to be about 23 to 30%. That's the average potency. So if you look at THC versus 1972, we mentioned it was 1%. When you got to around 1995, that was around 4%. When we got closer to the year 2000, it got closer to about 15%. And now it reaches approximately 23 to 30% on average. However, many people who engage in THC or marijuana use by vaping are getting THC levels that far exceed anything even remotely close to 23 to 30%. Wax, which is THC in most vapes, can get close to 88 to 99% potency. Now, when you think of that level of potency, daily high potency use increases a person's risk of a first episode psychotic episode by 5 times, fivefold. So the marijuana from the 70s, which I like to think of like my parents' weed, is ours these days is 500 times more potent than it was back then. So when someone says, what's the difference? It's just a little bit of weed. My answer to that is depends. What are you referring to when you say a little bit of weed? What is the THC content? What is the CBD content? Because the two of those things have distinct chemical markers and respond to our bodies in very different ways. When many people think of the legal and safe marijuana, and they think of the marijuana that has health benefits, what they are typically referring to is a version of CBD. Generally speaking, and I'm speaking generally, higher levels of CBD are considered to be safer and don't produce the same psychoactive effects as THC. There are some side effects that exist. There's drowsiness and there's fatigue. There's some stomach issues that people can experience. There's dry mouth that people can have. And there's definitely complications that can occur if you are mixing it with other substances. But CBD is what is referred to in the healthcare industry oftentimes as the medical purposes related to marijuana. For individuals who are needing to eat more, cancer patients who need to eat, they may get higher levels of marinol, which is CBD as well. Different components of CBD can have some effects that are healing, restorative, and helpful. For example, in many cultures, it's used as an anti-inflammatory as well. That is CBD. And again, you have to know what you're putting into your body and what substance you're taking. And let's distinguish it from THC. Consuming high levels or high volumes of THC can have very different effects on the body and the mind. Those effects lead more to impaired cognition, issues with their cognitive functioning. So think about issues thinking, issues creating memories and concentrating. The high levels, so 60% and above, can lead to psychotic symptoms such as hallucinations, delusions, paranoia. They can induce panic-like symptoms, increasing the heart rate, respiratory issues as well. And THC tends to be significantly more addictive than CBD as well. And therefore, it has a higher propensity for addiction, dependence, and withdrawal as well. There are some people on high levels of THC who will experience heavy panic attacks and panic-like symptoms as well. It's important to note that the effects of THC can vary between individuals. It can vary between the method of consumption. And there are a lot of factors to take into consideration. And if an individual is going to be using THC, they should be having a discussion with their provider. They should be having a discussion with their medical provider related to any pre-existing health conditions they may be experiencing that may make their use of THC unhealthy and co-occurring to some other issues as well. The challenge here is that individuals who engage in high levels of THC at younger ages are going to experience altered development of their brain. They're going to have higher odds of depression and social anxiety. They're going to increase the opportunity for them to experience early and heavy set psychosis. And according to the research, approximately 1 in 6 teens will develop some kind of mood disorder or sleep trouble if they start engaging in high levels of THC at a young age. Now, as a precursor to all of this, what many of us should be aware of, and it's just an interesting piece of information for us to have, is that generally speaking, the adult brain does not fully develop until about age 25. Not to gender the topic or discussion, but male brains take a little longer to develop than female brains, which I can easily say is why my wife is more mature than me, and my daughter, who's 4, maybe at times more mature than me too. But we know that there is different developmental milestones to the developmental brains as well. So female brains tend to develop a little earlier, closer to 23 or 22, and male brains generally will develop closer to age 25. Any trauma a person experiences, any adverse childhood response, any substance use, any kind of addictive behaviors that settle in prior to the age where your brain fully develops have a higher propensity for altering your brain. Think about that. It's not fully done yet. It's like the difference between walking on a fully made pavement versus walking on a pavement that still is wet. While it's still wet, you're going to see some areas where you are going to make indentations in that. Till the brain is fully developed, there are more propensities for the indentations to be made by trauma, by substance use, and so on and so forth. It's also why, if you think about this when it comes to some of the side effects and symptoms of mental health as well, mental illness, is that individuals who tend to have psychotic episodes or substance use in many ways regress back to the age where they started that behavior. So think about that. You could have a 40-year-old or a 50-year-old who in some ways still has qualities that are similar to a 16 or 17-year-old because developmentally their brain got stuck in that phase due to some of the things that they may have engaged in or done. So it's interesting to be mindful that this isn't me saying do not ever engage in any kind of substance use. It's me saying we should train ourselves and the next generation to be aware of when we are fully developed so we can make effective choices after our development has set in rather than prior to our development being in place. So the distinction there related to the use of THC and the use of CBD as well. And the way that I'm trying to describe this and give you an explanation is what we like to call harm reduction. It falls within the harm reduction category. Harm reduction or way of thinking of harm reduction is that if you choose to use substances, that's your choice. But you want to follow strategies that minimize your risks and keep you safer. So if you know someone who's struggling with substance use and they need help, one of the effective ways to support them is to not say, stop using, never use, you must be clean. It's to say, understand your use better and make better choices related to your use. So maybe it's helping a person identify what is the THC content of what you buy. Because if you're buying marijuana in California and you're buying it from a distributor or you're buying it from a shop, they advertise. It says it on there what the THC level is and what the CBD level is. You can ask for things that have lower levels of potency. You can ask and say, I have difficulty with anxiety. Which of these is not going to be as counterproductive to my anxiety to make healthier choices related to the use that you are engaging in? It's the same as the idea of supplying an individual who might have an issue with opiates with Narcan, which is a life-saving substance, which is a life-saving spray that people can use to combat overdose. It's the same as providing people with fentanyl test strips to help them reduce the issues of having fentanyl in the substances that they have. The more information we empower people with rather than try to scare them, the more likely they are to engage in dialogue with us and help themselves recover from any kind of use. And I'm a big proponent of sharing this information across the spectrum of ages. So people are aware of what choices they are making so they can start to make healthy choices. Where this also falls is within the spectrum of what's called motivational interviewing. Motivational interviewing is a method of discussion with individuals to help get them to learn a little bit more about what they are doing while simultaneously taking in all of these Venn diagrams of choices into consideration. Means you want to be mindful to give them information while being compassionate, while being collaborative, while allowing them to still have their autonomy and not take away their dignity and choice, and simultaneously associating them in a way that helps them evoke change. Instead of forcing a person to change, what we do is we validate and help them understand why they feel a certain way to help reduce the tension behind that. The example I like to frequently use as an individual who formerly used to do a lot of therapy through what was called dialectical behavioral therapy, DBT lens, is we like to take this balance of something that's called acceptance and change. It's the dialectic of DBT. Accepting an individual and validating how they feel while simultaneously offering them change strategies. Motivational interviewing does that really well. The classic example of helping a person through acceptance and change, the one I like to use, is the example that comes from Mary Poppins. I don't know who else here other than me grew up with Mary Poppins on their mind, but one of my favorite songs from Mary Poppins is "A spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down." Medicine is change. Change is difficult. People don't want it. How do you help them accept the change? You provide them a spoonful of sugar, which is validation. If I validate you, and then I suggest to you an alternative by offering you choices, then now I've provided you a spoonful of sugar to help your medicine go down, rather than just force feeding you medicine, because that won't work either. And therefore, you take this approach of balancing support for an individual rather than just throwing a substance at them and making them feel challenged by it. One of the ways in which we help individuals become more mindful of their choices through a motivational interviewing lens is also a way in which we help people become more present focused in their life and more in touch with their bodies and more in touch with the sensations of where they are and what their challenges may look like. So, what I want you to consider, and this will be a clinical exercise that all of us will do with each other, and you can take this out of here and try it with anybody else as well, is what I want you to do is take a moment and consider for yourself all of the thoughts you may have about the past, all of the thoughts you may have about the future, and think of time as a triangle. I'll share it with you on the screen in a second. But what I want you to do is take a moment and think to yourself, how much time do I as an individual spend focused on the past? How much time do I as an individual spend focused on the future? And how much time do I spend focused on the present? I'm not going to do two things. I'm not going to judge your math skills by breaking that down by 100%. And I'm not going to diagnose or label anyone, just offer some kind of insightful information. So take a moment, drop into the chat box your responses in terms of how much time do you feel you spend focused on the past? How much time do you spend as an individual focused on the future? And how much time do you as an individual spend focused on the present? To help us kind of create a baseline for where you are at related to your own mindset. Take a few moments. It may take you some time to kind of think about this and operationalize your responses. Before anyone asks, I'm not going to translate for you what past means in my opinion or future means in my opinion, or present means in my opinion. It's all your own decisions. Okay. So we're getting some responses. Some of the responses so far that I see are 60% past, 30% present, 20% future, 25% past, 50% present, 25% future. We have 20% present, 50% past, 30% future as well. Again, no response is going to be label judged as well. We have 45% in the past, 45% in the future, and 10% in the present. Different responses across 40, 40, 20, 30 in the past, 35 in the future, 20, 35 in the present. Wonderful. Take a moment, whether you're comfortable enough to share it in the chat box or not, but jot down for yourself what you think your responses are. And I see that Erin bolded her responses in the chat box. So we'll use hers as an example right now. 20% in the past, 50% in the present, 30% in the future as well. Susan just shared as well. 75, 25, 25. Um, thank you for that. So what I'm going to share with you next, again, no labels, no judgments related to this, is this. We tend to, as individuals, live in this very strong age of distraction. We have social media, we have instant gratification, we have read replies, we have all of these things that draw us towards different tenses of time. And one of the biggest paradoxes in life is that our brightest ability to have a good future hinges on our ability to pay attention to the present. What I have found through an abundance of research is an optimal perspective on this. 15% in the past, 15% in the future, and 70% in the present. Now, let's take a moment. Don't start going down that road of spiraling to what I'm sharing here. But typically speaking, individuals who are younger should lean a little bit more towards the future, and people who are a little bit older may lean a little bit more towards the past. You have a plus minus here of approximately 10. Forget the math for a moment and just focus on this one last sentence. Your past and your future should not exceed your present. So think of it from that lens. If your present is 50% and your past and future combined are 50%, you're in a good place. If your present is lower than 50%, which means your past and future are higher numbers, then what you want to ask yourself is, are you allowing your past and your future to control you a little bit too much? One of the things I love to share with people is a few quotes about the effects of the past and the effects of the future as well. One of the quotes I love to use about the past is, your past should be a place of reference, not a place of residence. Your past should be a place of reference, not a place of residence. And this is what we share with individuals. What we say to them is, if you look at your numbers, any individual who has an excessive focus on the past may have a little bit more of a susceptibility towards depression, towards anger, towards resentment, towards substance use. And individuals who have a little bit more of a susceptibility towards the future may experience higher levels of anxiety, suicidal ideation, or purposelessness. And I ask this question to individuals by saying to them, now that you've shared with me a little bit of your numbers, would you be interested in becoming a little bit more present focused to help you create a life that's worth living? I'm not telling you to change or reduce whatever it is you're doing. I'm just saying, are you interested in learning how to be a little bit more present in your life so that your past doesn't define you and your future doesn't control you? And if you think about the numbers that you shared a little bit, I'll share a little bit more information with you. Past focused individuals in general, tend to be very sentimental folk, keen on memory or past events. They have an appreciation for history, genealogy, scrapbooking, but if they have an unhealthy focus on the past, they're going to carry the weight of unresolved conflicts, past traumas, and fears all around with them. And it can lead them to resentment, to guilt, to lack of energy, to lack of goals. And they can be the kinds of people who bring up past arguments in current discussions. Over time, when that becomes debilitating, people turn to coping to help them get out of it, such as the substances that we've mentioned earlier. When you look at future focused individuals, for those of you who had higher numbers in the future, these individuals are like the natural, general multitaskers, the managers, the leaders, the planners. The challenge becomes if they take on too many responsibilities, more than they can ultimately handle, they tend to inadvertently cause themselves to start to feel inadequate. It can distract them. They can take on more things than they can actually cope with, and it can lead them to higher levels of burnout, distractibility, excessive worry, anxiety, and sleep disturbances. The idea that they keep waking up in the middle of the night because they're struggling with some of those symptoms. One of the things we tend to, a quote I shared with you about, the past, one of the quotes that I like to share about the future is an individual who has a high level of ambition without action leads to anxiety. So think about that for a moment. If you have a lot of ambitions, but you don't act on those ambitions, then what that does is it makes you feel anxious. And to reduce that anxiety, you may engage in an unhealthy coping skill, like substance use as well. So this triangle that we shared, the idea here is just to help people acclimate a little bit towards when you heard what I shared about the past and the future, you might have nodded along a little bit and said, yeah, that does sound like me. If I said a little bit more in the past or I said a little bit more in the future, I do have a little bit more of a susceptibility to that, which may make me more susceptible to engaging in unhealthy coping. That's a little bit of the way we want to shape people's thoughts. We don't want to take the perspective that says, stop doing your unhealthy thing. We want to help them get to that decision on their own. And there's some practical tips. The first tip, which isn't necessarily for all of us here, but it could be one that we take with us, is you want to be mindful that the earlier a person's exposed to substances, the higher the risk can be. And therefore, we want to practically get them to a place where they're comfortable understanding how to say no to use at young ages. And we want to help them be mindful of understanding what people can put in front of them. You want to model these coping skills and these decisions for the next generation as well, whether it's for yourself as well or for others. You watch somebody engage in a healthy coping skill, and you should be envious of that and say, I would love to do that. I would love to have that be my coping skill as well. If you set expectations related to your mental health monitoring, your sleep monitoring, and screening yourself annually for any symptoms, you have a better chance of catching unhealthy coping before it fully sets in for an individual as well. Some of the red flags to think about, whether it's youth or ourselves, this is for youth with substances. If you start seeing these sudden changes, the one I want to focus on the most is sleep. We sometimes forget how important sleep is for our overall mental health, but sleep can be a supportive factor related to everything, a protective factor and a supportive factor as well. Whether it comes to youth and the amount of time they need to sleep or adults as well. I read a recent study that said the percent of individuals who can function with less than 5 hours of sleep consistently on a nightly basis, rounded to the nearest whole number, is 0%. 0% of individuals can function without 6 hours of sleep every single night consistently going forward, which is why many people in early stages of being parents or when they move into college and they have to actually burn the candle at both ends, find themselves experiencing higher levels of emotional volatility. person who has their first psychotic break or crash while they're in college, person who experiences postpartum depression or postpartum anxiety for the first time after having children. Not having sleep plays a large factor in that as well. Some of the last things I want to share in terms of coping skills related to this is that it's not just the education that's important for individuals, but it's the idea of prevention. If we are able to identify patterns that people have engaged in that made them feel unsafe or have engaged in unsafe behaviors, it's going to be much more productive than going down the path of treatment. The perspective we like to share frequently is that an ounce of prevention is worth its measure in gold of treatment because just a little bit of prevention can go much further away than any kind of treatment as well. So our ability to prevent ourselves from falling down an addictive cycle by identifying things like support groups, communities like this, people we can lean on, and we can strengthen some of those alternative coping skills, we're going to find ourselves not falling prey to the past and not falling prey to the future as well. So, lastly, here is what I would define as basic, simple, healthy coping mechanisms that all of us can use to minimize our susceptibility for substance use, but also minimize our susceptibility towards being challenged by the past and the future. Exercise, whatever that may mean to you, whether it's just getting outside and taking in the air for a few minutes, whether it's going for a walk around the block, whether it's just standing up every few minutes after every hour of work that you've engaged in. Meditating or mindfulness for many people can be helpful. My favorite one of all, spending time with someone that you love and trust. Just sitting next to an individual that you trust and love for 8 minutes will allow and secrete the oxytocin in your brain to feel comforted and safe. So even if you say no words, and I don't know about any of you, but if I've had this experience on many occasions, you call a best friend and you say to them, just get in the car and don't speak. I just need to just sit and ride around with somebody for a few minutes. Just being next to someone you love and support itself can be a coping mechanism. Engaging in pursuits of pleasures and interests. And for those who need it, seeking professional help or professional communities as well. Journaling, which many people do as a way to get some emotional clarity and process their feelings. And lastly, and in my opinion, again, really most importantly, a good night's sleep, consistent sleep hygiene. What many people have found is that one of the frontline treatments for PTSD these days in the VA is not going down the path of cognitive behavioral therapy or those forms of treatment of therapy. The first thing that they do is they teach the veterans sleep hygiene. Let's get you back to sleeping. And once you are sleeping, you can be in a better place to be able to receive effective treatment. Sleep in its own right is powerful. And lack of sleep in its own right can really be terrorizing for an individual. So being able to just find a crucial amount of sleep for yourself and reducing your stress can really help a person not fall prey to what we mentioned at the beginning, which was the two reasons people engage in substance use, to feel something or to not feel something. The better you sleep, the more you're going to socialize and connect and bond with individuals and spend less time trying to cope in an unhealthy way on your own. The more time you spend engaging in these coping skills, the less you're going to allow your past to define you and your future to control you. So thank you for listening. Thank you for participating. It's a complicated topic, but it's a personal one. So I want to open this up for any honest questions or discussions. There's no one size fits all answer to all of this. So I'm hoping that we can kind of navigate some of these responses together and help each other overcome any of the unhealthy copings that all of us engage in. Because each of us has something we do that is unhealthy, and it's not up to us to judge anyone else's choice as to what they do with their unhealthy as well. Let's help each other find healthy mechanisms for coping. Thank you for the time. Thank you for listening. Any questions, comments, thoughts, criticism, or feedback is certainly welcomed as well.
I have a question.
Elon, I
Oh,
just want quick before questions. I just want to give like a quick, like, oh my goodness, that was so wonderful. Thank you so, so very much. I think we all have so much that we can relate to with everything that you shared. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And yes, open up to questions.
I have a question.
Hi, Mitch.
Speaking of sleep, my son has schizoaffective, and he's on about 400 milligrams of clozaril every evening, and he hasn't up until recently been taking his meds regularly, and he has been taking them regularly, and he still like twice a week gets into these things where he doesn't sleep for 2 days and turns into a zombie, and I can't figure out what the triggers are because it's so detrimental to him, as you've pointed out. When he goes 2 days, and it just is happening regularly. Any ideas?
I can give you general broad strokes ideas with prefacing a few things. One is I'm not a psychiatrist. I don't even play one in real life at DD Hirsch. Um, but what I can tell you is I've had a lot of individuals that we've seen and experienced using have used Clozaril. And what my recommendation to begin with is that preventative routine is just as important. And what that means is if there's a set regimented schedule on a daily basis, that an individual who experiences thought-based symptoms, such as schizoaffective disorder, can engage in regularly, meaning you wake up at this time, you eat at this time, you go to sleep at this time, you do all of these other productive things at this time, and you supplement that with the ability to get the body moving enough to exert energy that will help the person regulate their sleep. Similar, and I'm not trying to infantilize your child in any way, but similar to a routine that children are on that makes them feel contained. Like I have a 2-year-old, I have a 1-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 6-year-old in the other room. And I'm really grateful to be with you guys tonight because I don't have to deal with bedtime. But what bedtime looks like is regimented. They got to wake up at the same time, they got to eat at the same time, they got to go to sleep at the same time, and they have to play at the same time. It's containing. It doesn't allow the thoughts to run wild because they know what's coming next.
Uh-huh.
That routine, with adding to that routine, quite a bit of substantial things that help them release stress, whether that's exercising, whether it's showering, whether it's engaging in something, can be really supportive and helpful. And if over a period of time, engaging in a routine, and this is for all of us, not just, your son, but engaging in a routine, if that doesn't seem to set in effectively, then that brings you back to wanting to have those discussions with the psychiatrist related to what might we want to adjust
Right.
to find the right low and slow dose that may be supportive as well.
Okay. Well, thank you. More routine.
Elan, I have a question. Um, my brother has, I think I connect with that saying that you said that ambition without action creates anxiety. Are there any techniques that you would recommend that would be encouraging for someone to take a step in terms of the action that they should take?
Yes, it's a wonderful question. I'll use the clinical term and then I'll translate it into my own English as well. The clinical term is called behavioral activation. What behavioral activation really means is take every big ambitious step and break it down into each as many as possible small substeps as possible. So if the ambitious step is, I want to have a full-time job where I work 9 to 5. Wonderful. We all deserve to have vocational and occupational autonomy in that way. But there are 1,000 other decisions and choices that need to be made before you even get to that step. So if we break the ambition down step by step into manageable bites, that ends up making the person feel like they're accomplishing more. And at the same time, it creates this kind of like snowballing effect where it's like, now that I accomplished this thing, it gives me a little bit of that momentum to accomplish the next thing and the next thing after, and the next thing after that. You kind of take it back to the beginning and say, what may be the first step towards whatever that ambitious goal is, whatever it may be, and take it step by step, and even think of those steps as day by day. What is one thing I can do today? And today it may just be I'm putting myself in the mindset to do something tomorrow. Tomorrow, I'm going to open up a book. The next day, I'm going to write something down and go bit by bit by bit so that the eventual goal feels accomplishable because you're not jumping steps. What oftentimes happens, especially for individuals who struggle with anxiety or depression and also struggle with thought-based disorders like a schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder, is they get these brief moments of ambition and they want to hurdle up the ladder. And what happens is that in those brief moments of excitement, they attempt to hurdle up the ladder. And because they eventually try to jump too high, they fall back to the beginning and it further perpetuates failure for them. And they choose to then give up. So they kind of try to skip. And because they're skipping, it further internalizes for them this component of being a failure, which then makes them not want to do anything after the fact. And we have to remind them, especially in those moments where they feel really, really empowered, you got to take it little bit by little. The example I like to use, and this has happened to me as well on like my own journey for like physical health, is you get really excited and you get really invested on wanting to exercise. So you say to yourself, I'm finally going to do it. So I'm going to do 100 push-ups. And you do 100 push-ups if you can, and the next day you can't feel your wrists or your legs or your knees, and you're in bed for a week. Rather than telling yourself, I'll do 10 today and 10 tomorrow, and the next week I'll start 15, and the next week after that I'll start 20. That's the same when it comes to behavioral activation in really, really small steps as well.
Great, thank you.
I know we're getting wonderful questions, but I'm wondering if there's any criticism or feedback as well, because like that's always needed and accepted related to the content too.
I have one quick question. You talked a lot about marijuana. You didn't differentiate between sativa and indica, which one of them's quite an upper and the other one's more of a depressant. Any comment on that?
Good question. I didn't go down that route because it ends up being too much information in terms of going CBD, THC, sativa, indica, and having these four quadrants.
Uh,
In keeping it a little bit more basic, the thought process we like to take is a little bit more of the shy away from THC, focus more on CBD. And then when you're in the categories of higher levels of CBD versus THC, make more of those own choices individually for yourself related to what might have more up effects and what might have more down effects. Some of that is a little bit of like trial and error, but it's a little bit more understandable to be able to clearly go into a shop and say, please do not give me anything that is higher than 20% or 30% THC content. That's a little easier and clearer of a guideline to suggest to individuals.
okay.
I know Janice and Debbie had their hand up. Janice.
I was just thinking, I had many friends and family members who went through Beit Teshuva, the rehab, and I was shocked many years ago that gambling was an addiction. I didn't realize that people had that shopping. And you didn't talk about that mainly. You talked about marijuana, weed, which when I took my NAMI 10 years ago, family to family class, we had 27 people, and they said, what was the for your family member psychotic break? 99% of us raised our hand. It was marijuana that triggered their psychotic break, which I was shocked. That is such a high number. But I was just bringing up other forms of addiction.
There are so many.
many.
It's a good point,
So
Janice.
many.
There's so many
Mine is
pathways.
mine is frozen yogurt, and I recently started eating it again. And I was walking by a frozen yogurt place, and I'm like, I'm not having it. I'm not having it, and I just feel so empowered because I said no, because I can go 3 years without it. And once I start, it's like every day I want, and it's summer and it's hotter, and I'm like, but I get the donut thing with you, and once you don't think about it, you don't have it, you don't want it. But once I I've never done any type of drugs or alcohol. I've always had that. When I was very young in third grade, my girlfriend's father said, your friends are a mirror image of yourself and they reflect upon you. And I really was careful because I was mindful at a young age not to be around people that did things that I didn't care how popular I was who I was. But I learned that at a young age, and a lot of people don't have that strength that I do have. And I always tell people, if I started marijuana now I'm 61 years old, I probably have a problem because addiction's in my family. And I, that's why I don't start anything like that because it is. But a lot of people don't have that strength.
Yeah.
And this is wonderful what you're talking about because these tools, I took a bunch of notes, but thank you so much for taking time, Elon, for all of us at NAMI. We
My
appreciate
pleasure. And there are so many pathways to what we could discuss. For example, I do a gambling and addiction talk at local high schools in the area that I live on a yearly basis for all the high school students. And we talk about gambling. We talk about the addictive component behind that. For the purposes of this discussion, because of this wonderful connection I had made with Cynthia at a roundtable event where we talked about marijuana, specifically because of the legality and the misconception related to how it can cause psychotic effects. We kind of wanted to focus on that here, but there are so many striations to exactly what you said. Like anything and everything can become habit forming for individuals. The question you really have to ask yourself is, what is a healthier version of an addiction as compared to an unhealthy? We could talk about cell phone addiction. We could talk about internet addiction. We can talk about coffee addiction. But some of those things may be better for you than others. And therefore, we all just need to be mindful of what it is that we have has control over us as individuals. And have we found a benefit and a cost benefit analysis that we've determined it's enough for me to be able to tolerate? So for this purpose, we went a little bit down the marijuana route. But there are so many other types of discussions that can be had related to the effects of other addictions as well.
Thank you.
Hey, Janice, I walked into Ralph's yesterday and a checker was walking out with a bag of Lay's potato chips and asked me if I'd like one. And I thought about it and I thought I better not. And I took one and I go shopping in there. And 20 minutes later, I buy this big fucking bag of potato chips and ate the whole thing. And I thought to myself, how could I do that? I guess I just can't eat one. And you're right, Elon, you could get addicted to anything, even potato chips. All it took was one, Janice.
I know that one frozen yogurt every night I want one. But it's so hard and I can't imagine if you do have this mental illness and you're trying to numb yourself or take care of with a lot of people with alcohol in addition to we're talking about marijuana tonight or weed, but it's everywhere you go in California, it's everywhere.
Right.
Do you notice people driving, Elon, that they're just driving crazy? I think they're all doing, they're not sober. They're doing
There's
something.
there's I mean, that existed for a long time. My mom always taught me to drive like everyone else doesn't know how to drive to keep myself safe, but I hear you on that too.
Absolutely. Thank you. Debbie, I know you had your hand up, and then I see Kazu and Cynthia.
Yes, thank you. Well, actually, the first thing that came to mind that kind of ties in with what Janice had to say, Janice had the lovely privilege of being told at a very young age the dangers of these types of addictions. So she can sit here tonight and talk about how she hasn't been impacted, which I absolutely love. And what I also love is that one of the things I do here at NAMI is the Ending the Silence presentation. And I have kind of implemented a marijuana page for the students. So if you don't know, Elan, about the Ending the Silence, we go into middle schools and high schools and we talk about the early signs and symptoms of mental health conditions. However, one of the things that you also talked about is sleep deprivation and insomnia. And
Mhm.
so some of the things that occur and what I've noticed and what I think has happened with many of our loved ones and many people who I serve on a weekly basis is their children are unaware of the early signs and symptoms of mental health conditions. So they might start experiencing insomnia and they can't sleep and they're getting stressed out and they're taking AP classes and they're cheerleaders or they're on the baseball team like my son as a pitcher and and so he's like, I've got to sleep, I've got to sleep. And so when someone at school says, hey, dude, you know what'll help you sleep? And they offer marijuana,
Mhm.
the individual would be, I can say emphatically that the individuals, the children that we have seen come into our meetings, these children would be mortified that they started using marijuana as a drug, but what they were trying to do is alleviate the symptom of an early onset mental health condition. So one of the things that I've been doing when I go into the schools is I do talk to the students about these early prodromal symptoms, which is not being able to sleep, anxiety, and letting them know just what you said, that your brains are still developing till you're 26 years old and people are going to offer you quick fixes and then we refer them to counselors. So
Mhm.
I just wanted you to know that I really appreciate your non-judgmental, compassionate approach and the harm reduction approach,
Thank you.
because so many of the individuals who started using marijuana and ended up in a psych hospital in what was deemed a THC-induced psychosis, they feel guilt, they feel shame, they feel embarrassment because they were just trying to sleep. They were just trying to eliminate symptoms. And so, so much of what you've said tonight really resonates with me. And I really love the approach that you take and the education that you provide. And I'm really hoping, I saw Elizabeth giving shout outs because I really think adding a page to our presentation about the dangers of marijuana use when we're talking to our high schoolers and our middle schoolers, because this starts at a very young age. And
Right.
then lastly, you had me in tears with sitting next to someone you love is a coping mechanism. One of the things I've been doing lately is working with children from 12 to 25-year-old who have early psychosis. And some of my colleagues, we come into our meetings and we're talking about how it's gone with our clients. And some of them said, my 8-year-old just fell asleep. They weren't even engaged. And one of the things that my supervisor had said is that might be the safest place they have been in all week. And they were able to go to sleep in your presence. And that just really struck me about sitting next to someone who cares about you as a coping mechanism. So I just thank you for your presentation. I'm going to take so much of it back to the work I do here at NAMI and in my other part of my professional life. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. I want to validate two things you said that stood out to me so much. One was that there's I can't remember where exactly, but there's a public health slogan in another country that translates into English something along the lines of treating mental illness is vital, preventing it is revolutionary. And like, I love that mindset of like, yes, we want to do what we can when it comes to us, but there's so much more that can be done from the prevention side. And like, that's the real public health route that we should be, going down and engaging in. Um, and I have heard of NAMI ending the silence, and I've heard of and I've had some friends schools, kids schools who've had you guys come in there and talk about that with them, and I think that I oftentimes think about the idea of just sitting with people, like the oxytocin that you can experience by just sitting with a person you love. There's a children's book, and like for anyone who has kids, there's a wonderful, wonderful children's book. It's called The Rabbit Who Listened. If you've not come across this book, the idea is the premise of this book is there's a kid who's building a tower, and his tower breaks, and every single animal comes by, and each animal's has a certain type of internal quality or mentality to them that wants to help this child fix the problem. So, like, the elephant comes and says, let's throw all these things away. The kangaroo says, let's jump on these other things. The snake says, let's go break somebody else's tower. And the rabbit just sits there and doesn't do anything and doesn't talk, doesn't make a sound, and just comes inches and inches and inches closer and listens to this kid talk about what happened. And eventually they build a tower back up with each other. It's a wonderful book. It's a great book for anywhere between like a 4 and 7 year old as well, but there's also qualities in it that are phenomenal for parents. I don't know the author off the top of my head, and there's no marketing or advertising I'm offering for it, but it's just a book that my kids have. And the idea of just sitting there in silence when a person is struggling in its own right can be restorative. And it's a phenomenal book. It's called The Rabbit Who Listened. And that's what came to mind when you said that.
I love that. And I just wanted to circle back to one comment because I really need to say that I thank Janice Black Warner because she had that blessing of learning at an early age. And because of that, she gives back month after month after month, and she wants to give people what she received, and so many haven't. So many haven't had that lovely sit down conversation with a caring adult who lets them know this is not good for you. And if you go down this path, so many people are just surviving. So I just really appreciate NAMI and the contribution that Janice Black Warner does, that you do, Janice, because I see you on your Instagram, you're out there at UCLA, and you are boots on the ground because you care so much about the mental health of young people. So thank you for making it possible to have these monthly talks.
Thank you, Debbie. This is almost our 11th or 12th year.
Well, I just feel so lucky to be a part of it. So thank you.
Wow. Thank you. And Erin, thank you for continuing it. It was Sharon Dunis's vision from our NAMI president years ago. And we don't have a home in Los Angeles, so we used to have it at Vista Del Mar in the boardroom. I was on the board there. And then the COVID, we moved it here. It just helps me. Every day I get phone calls helping people. And and Mitch, I've known you for many years. You've come to all of my speaker series. And Mitch, my son, is also on clozapine. He just got out of the hospital yesterday. He wasn't in the hospital for 3 years. And what happens when you think your meds you don't need them when they're working, and then they stop one day, it affects them. And I have never had my son on 550 milligrams of clozapine ever, but it's big. It's big. But he doesn't have he's doing really well. So sometimes I'm learning about routine tonight, Elan, how important it is. I just spent 10 days with my 2-year-old granddaughter and 6-year-old granddaughter from Georgia for 10 days. And these girls are such on a routine, and coming here, and we went to Disneyland and we're eating things we shouldn't be eating. And, I just need to detox myself from eating and it's just all the bad foods all around us at all ages, and it's hard, but they're back in Georgia today on their routine, and I'm getting back on mine, and for all of us, and sleep. Elan, this has been fantastic. And we don't want to lose control of ourselves. You don't have to be addicted to anything, just having your daily routine. And as you said, exercise, Elan. You don't have to, run 10 miles the first day. Try a half a mile. Go around the block the first time. Or it's so hard. Life is, as my 92-year-old dad always said, life is not without pain, and it's an obstacle. And it's not easy for all of us. And that's why every day I talk to so many people and I give time, and it helps me. And all of us, we're not alone, right? Thank you.
Elan, someone mentioned in the chat about excessive sleeping. That also applies in my situation. Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, briefly, because I know that we Elizabeth had somebody who was going to come next up, but so excessive sleeping is hypersomnia. If people are familiar with it, hypersomnia does have underlying medical and psychiatric conditions associated with it, especially if you're on medication. So you do need to be mindful of looking into the symptomatology behind it. I do want to make a distinguish. I want to distinguish between hypersomnia because a person experiences symptoms of mental health disorders or mental illness versus a person who's experiencing hypersomnia because they have restlessness or purposelessness. Those are two different things. So you do want to be mindful to look into first, is it related to a psychiatric condition? Because many medications can be overly challenging and they can put people into large, like long forms of sleep, and also the symptoms of certain mental health conditions can deal with that as well. But I'd kind of double down on what we mentioned earlier as well, that there are a few functional things related to sleep hygiene that people who engage in hypersomnia need to be mindful of. One is they should be limiting or having no caffeine whatsoever, and they should be minimizing or reducing any form of screen time they have before they go to bed or attempt to go to bed. So even in hypersomnia, you want to be mindful to not be engaging in those things, so that they can find themselves getting more regulated sleep. Um, if you find yourself going to sleep beyond the hour of like 2 a.m., then you're gonna find yourself falling into unhealthy habits as well. Um, so if it's just exclusively coming from a medical or psychiatric condition, you want to be mindful to consult a healthcare provider related to like where it's coming from. But at the same time, sleep hygiene, using your bed exclusively for sleep and sleep only, is one of the parts that can minimize some of the hypersomnia as well. Like, don't watch TV in your bed, don't read in your bed, don't do those things in your bed. Do that next to your bed, do that adjacent to your bed. Your bed should be for sleep. If you're an adult, it could be for other things too. We're not going to get into what that is, but bed is for sleep, and that's it. And then you keep the rest of the stuff out of that space so that you don't actually have the bed feel like this amoeba space where you don't know and have clarity related to it. It's one of the most important components of sleep hygiene as well, is just going into bed when you are tired. Don't go into bed when you are not falling asleep.
Thank you so much for these really practical tips. I think it's so helpful. I want to go to Kazu and then Cynthia.
Uh, Hi, how are you? It was
Well,
a great presentation. Thank you so much. I have a question about the present and the future, but
mhm.
I would like to share my experience about smoking pot. Like it was 20 years ago. I was in Holland and I smoked pot, and I was a social smoke, pot smoker. I wasn't addicted or nothing like that, but it was like it gave me hallucination and also paranoia. So I thought my friend who was with me was going to kill me, and I saw his head was really giant, and then it was very, very traumatic experience. And I have two schizophrenics in my family, my mom and my brother. So I thought, oh, I was gonna be that way maybe, like, so I
Mhm.
was very scary. And but I stopped smoking pot after that, and but it bothered me, that experience bothered me for like another 5 years. That gave me like bad anxiety and some like suicidal thoughts, like, so. And I now know, oh, it may contain this THC, but it was 20 years ago, so it was just a joint, so I had no idea what it was. But so now I have this knowledge, so I feel like, I don't know, like it may be the THC, so I have, that's my comment and about this. And I just thought, wow, I wish I knew this before. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
to your point, many people experience that. Like, had they had the informed consent, if they knew, maybe they would have made the same choice, but at least they would have gone in knowing what they're choosing rather than having something happen to them.
mhm.
That's the big difference.
Yeah. So, yeah, then my therapist said to me like 5 years ago, you have to be careful about that. So, after that I stopped smoking pot. So I didn't have any experience, similar experience after that. But my question is, so you talked about this future and the present, and I wonder how I can differentiate future and present. So today is present, now is present, but the future how can I like identify future? Tomorrow is future too, but 3 months from today, or when I think about my plan, or I have a plan to do something in 6 months, and I get anxiety usually. So how I don't know. It depends on the person. So about 3 years later, 10 years later, after. So do you have any suggestion?
It's a wonderful question. So, the short version, let's do the short version. So I submitted to provide a TED Talk and hopefully it will be accepted at an upcoming conference. It's titled Mindfulness is a Dirty Word. The premise behind it is that many people struggle with their own mindfulness because they think mindfulness is like this like Soul Cycle LA Zen hippie yoga thing that only people who have like money and time can do. The premise of the talk is that really mindfulness should be rebranded and repackaged as just being present focused. So to answer your question, anything that you do in the present, even if it's preparing for your future, can still be present. So if right now I am writing down plans for what I want my future to look like and doing it in a productive way, then that's not future, that's present still. But if I am in this place where I'm sitting and I'm having what we call anticipatory anxiety, is what if everything goes wrong tomorrow, the next day, the day after that? Or there are 100 things I have to do, so I have decision paralysis over doing those things. Then I'm stuck in the future. And by being stuck in the future, I don't actually experience the present. Like a phenomenal thing for you to think about is, in reality, the past and the future, this is a little metaphysical, but why not? The past and the future don't actually exist because if they did, you can visit them. You can't visit the past or the future. All you actually have is the now. And when you, in your mind, get stuck in the future, you're wasting the present. So there are like a lot of functional things that you can do to help yourself become a little bit more present focused. The thing is, think about the past in small doses. The reason you should focus on the past is only to make better decisions in the present. The reason you should focus on the future is to be able to make better decisions for the future. So if you're planning something for the future, then that's healthy. You're not stuck. You're not allowing it to make you worry about things. You stay focused about the future just long enough to prepare for it. That's a healthy mindset. And there are things you can do. One of the things you can do is become very aware of your body. Many of us have in our body a sensation where we can tell when we're starting to kind of veer off. And if you can ground yourself better in your body, you can help yourself become a little more present. If you become more conscious of your thoughts and you're thinking things through or planning for things, you can do that. But to your question, Kazu, and it's like a very great thing you can do because it very much falls in line with me as well. I tend to be the kind of person who wants to take on a million things all at once, and I tend to want to make a million decisions all at once. So instead of doing that, what I do is I schedule in my calendar time to be anxious. I have a calendared time on my it's literally on my Outlook calendar. It says anxiety time, where I get to sit and I get to throw against the wall all the things that are on my head, think about them, make choices, make decisions, say, what if this happens and what if that happens and what if I need to do this and what if I need to do that? And I focus all of that energy into 1/2 hour so I actually can be productive with it rather than allowing it to follow me throughout the entire day and follow me throughout the entire week. Schedule time to have anxiety. Schedule time to cry. Why not? It's healthy to get those experiences out of your, and not just allow them to pile up. And doing that allows you to actually be more productive in that experience as well.
Okay, that sounds interesting, but
it's challenging. It's challenging. All you got to do is try it once for everything. You try it once and you see how it works for you, and then you take it the next step and you see if you want to do it anymore after that as well.
Okay. I will try that. Thank you so much. It's very interesting. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Thank you so much. I know I can probably speak for all of us. We're very ready for your TED Talk. And so when that happens, we're ready. Cynthia, I want to get to you before we wrap up for the
I know it's getting in. Alon, thank you so much. I'm always learning from you. You're unbelievable. Um, the one thing that you said is that if the teenagers could go to their doctor and open up about the THC use, I don't know how any teenager would go to their doctor and tell them that I'm doing this. How can we get into the schools to prevent and just like you say, model coping skills of what should be doing, knowing how much marijuana you should smoking, that your brain is still not to its full extent growth, men, women, different ages. How can we help the middle school and the high schools and the parents? The parents think it's legal and everything is wonderful.
I think there are a few factors to that. One is, to Debbie's point, getting out there and advocating more. We're recording this, so send it to as many people as you want. Let's start there too. So
Right.
advocating for this and having more empowering discussions. But I think fundamentally, when you get down to the root of it, the discussions that I've had, and I've had a lot of discussions with teenagers and high school students, they do tell their doctor. They
Oh,
do speak
wow.
to their doctor. And the
I'm
reason that they do is because if, as parents and as educators and adults, we use non-stigmatizing language to discuss this, they're more likely to listen. If you go down the route of the old school mentality of reefer madness, it's going to kill you, it's going to rot a hole in your brain, then the moment it doesn't, they don't believe anything that you say to them. But if you empower them to make choices,
Right.
they're going to be able to lean more towards the side of cautious, healthy choices. There have been so many teenagers, and you have the same exact experience when it came to, sex education, for example. The more healthy sex education was provided, the more people went and spoke to their doctors about contraceptives and had that available to them and they were comfortable. Discussions about substance use fall into the same place, and the doctor asks you in a non-stigmatizing way things like, what substances do you use, or how frequently do you use substances? The teenager who is taught that they know the distinction between what's healthy and unhealthy for them will have a little bit more of a direct conversation with their provider. And we've seen that time and time again, that providing them with safe, clear information empowers them to speak up about their choices. So again, it's educating people at younger ages, getting to them in school environments as well, educating the families and the parents and the providers to not use that language that makes it sound like you use it once, it's going to kill you. When it doesn't kill them, they don't believe anything you said ever again. And now you find yourself in a battle over the conversation rather than trying to empower them to make safe choices. So I think it was several approaches. One is what you guys are doing here, having these groups, having these advocacy people meet together, having this series that is being discussed and disseminating the information, getting them at young ages, and also just being transparent, not
Right.
trying to shock factor people into agreeing with us on things, but just giving them the basic facts and eventually allowing them to make choices on their own.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Alon.
My pleasure.
And thank you again, Cynthia, for cornering Elan and making him come this evening.
Finally,
We are very grateful. Elizabeth, our program director, our esteemed program director, who does so much for our community, thank you so much. You've dropped a survey in the chat. These surveys help us continue our free programs and services. So please take a moment to fill that out. It really does help us with all of our funding and meet our program deliverables. We have a grant with the LA County Department of Mental Health and the Jewish Federation, among other programs and grants. So if you have a moment, please fill out that survey. Any other last thoughts or questions for Elan before we close out this amazing presentation?
Thank you.
I
Thank you
just
again for having me.
I'm
I
getting
did,
two of those books by Corey Dorfield that you recommended about the rabbit, and one Goodbye Friend, Hello Friend.
yeah, they're amazing.
I'm ordering them now. They're out of print pretty much.
I will, for those who asked me directly, drop in the chat box for those who need it or want it, my email address. So if you want to just reach out, or if you have any questions, comments, thoughts beyond this,
Wonderful.
so you have that there, and you can also share it with those who are in need. And if you're interested, you can email me and I can get you a copy of the presentation and slides as well, and any additional research that was behind it. But thank you again for this opportunity. Thank you, Cynthia, for making this happen. Thank you, Janis Black-Warner, and thank you, Erin and Elizabeth, for hosting this. It's really been a wonderful evening for myself as well.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elan. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Have a lovely evening. And we'll see you back here in September. We go on summer hiatus for the months of July and August. So I wish you all a very, very happy summer. I hope that you can be present and spend that time with friends and family out in the sunshine, like Debbie is showing on her screen. And I just wish you all the best. And we'll be online. And if you need anything, you know where to find us.